You need to be focusing on value. You need to be doing these things. And I think that the state of ProcureTech and AI is now enabling that, because there are tools that will take some of that data drag away from procurement. And then, of course, you think, okay, are we all going to be made redundant, or we don't need any analysts, and what's going to happen? And I think not at all. I think this is enriching procurement work. This is allowing procurement to think and to utilize data and to employ insights in the ways that it just couldn't do before. Procurement was drowning in data, drowning in POs, drowning in technical work and risk assessments. I heard somebody saying it was Guru Satya from Etsy that was on your show before, saying they got 80 risk assessments a week. And I think they're a team of like 10 people. And now they have a tool that does it for them.
Thank you so much for joining another edition of The Never-Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement. Today, I have the great pleasure of being joined by Adrienne Cole. She is a procurement advisor, a fractional expert, and a special passion for Adrienne around product launches. Adrienne, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sean. I'm delighted to be here.
So I'd love to dig into strategy and value and where procurement fits. Talk to me.
I will. So let's start with value. I kind of brand myself a value procurement expert. So, what does that actually mean? For me, it means that the primary purpose of procurement is to deliver value to its stakeholders, to the company in which it operates. And I think a lot of teams get lost along the way there in terms of understanding what does that value look like. And many teams are indoctrinated to understand that that value is the same as saving money. So I kind of grew up professionally in the beauty care business, buying high-end packaging at Procter & Gamble for beauty care brands. And saving money is not necessarily the best way to do that. You can sell something for $100 that somebody doesn't actually need if it doesn't look nice.
And some people buy based on the packaging.
Oh, most people buy those type of products based on the packaging. Absolutely. Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is very early on in my procurement career, I learned that value is a much broader concept. And sometimes that value is a lower cost. Absolutely. That is a valid component of value. There's no doubt about it, but it's not the only component of value. So value to me is something that's dynamic, and what determines value in that particular instance for that particular product or service on that day is what is the most useful thing to the company in that moment. So that's where you come onto your strategy. So, what might be the objective of the company at that time is to build margin. It may be to build share. It may be to upgrade their product. It may be to get something out into the market before other companies. It may be to reduce risk. It can be a whole variety of things. And obviously it may, innovation of all types, and also supply chain, risk, sustainability, all of these are elements of value. So to me, the reason why, despite AI and everything that's happened, we haven't all been replaced by machines is because it takes a human to figure out, okay, today, where I'm sitting at my desk today, what are those components of value and how are they racked and stacked today for this piece of work? So for me, that's really what procurement are here to do. That's the judgment call that procurement people are making every day. And the more nuanced you can be about that judgment call, the more you will bring to your company, the more impact you will have.
And the more deeply you understand it too.
And the more deep, absolutely. Absolutely.
I find it's one thing to describe hey, I'm going to help EBITDA, I'm going to save money. But then you dig down and before you know it, some folks in the business don't really know how they're going to do that other than maybe trying to squeeze the supplier. And there's so much more to it than that.
Correct.
And what does value mean?
Absolutely.
I think you made one of the most important points of emphasis is for so many people, especially in a product launch, saving money can have the inverse effect on a successful product launch. And I think this almost Sometimes, some teams, it feels like a neuroticism of just got to save money, got to squeeze
Yeah,
costs out, as
yeah,
opposed to, no, we need the right product at the right place at the right time, which is really the most important thing. I think some people lose sight of. I
exactly.
love
Or
that you're highlighting that.
you need a competitive edge over your company's competitors, and that could be a more innovative product or a higher quality product or a certain aspect of what you're selling, whether it's goods or services, that does something your competitors don't do. And that may be something that is more expensive, but it may drive more margin. I mean, I've worked in procurement teams where we were measured on margin. So that cuts out the whole exclusive focus on cost as well. And so, so how do you know? And I mean, one thing
Yeah,
is also, if you just on the value thing for a moment more, is, you know yourself, you go to the supermarket and you might buy a bottle of wine and then you might buy, washing up liquid to clean the dishes with. Your value equation is not the same for those two things. And then
quite.
if we go outside the supermarket, you buy a car, you have a very different set of value criteria. So it's actually very relatable if you think about it in non-enterprise terms. You don't employ the same lens with everything you buy in the real world. So why would you do that internally?
Yeah.
And the reason I think people get lost along the way is because they're not really close enough to what the company is trying to achieve. So, we seem to be going past this, thank God, in the procurement world now. But for many years, we had the whole discussion about procurement doesn't have a seat at the table, and I should report to this person, and I should get more respect, and this and that. So those arguments are really irrelevant. If you actually show up looking like a business person who has a deep understanding of what your company is trying to achieve and how it plans to achieve that, and then saying, this is what I bring to those company objectives, that is how you automatically have impact on your stakeholders. And then you don't need to be having the academic conversation about who does what. You automatically become intrinsic and useful and impactful to the company direction. And you're able to have a much more nuanced conversation with your stakeholders and with your execs. So, for me, I don't know how you would set out on that journey if you don't understand what the endpoint you're trying to get to is, which is governed by the company strategy. And then your job as a procurement person is to translate that into supply network and supplier and cost metrics so that you can say, okay, because I sit in a unique position between the inside of the company and the outside of the company, now that I understand where we're going, what we're trying to achieve, what our fault lines are, what our objectives are, I can now go away and look outside into the supply network and say, these are the things I can bring in these proportions for these needs. And that to me is what procurement should be doing and what it should always have been doing.
It's an art of the possible to solve towards a mission, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to processing the next PO.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
this feels like so far for some procurement leaders that
Mm-hmm.
I know I can think back to conversations that sound kind of like, I know that's what we need to do, but I'm stuck doing
Mm-hmm.
this right now. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
sense of, okay, now there's only one person that can
Mm-hmm.
fix that. What needs to be true, dot, 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 for us to move
Mm-hmm.
2%, 5%, 10%, like little bit
Mm-hmm.
at a time, bite-sized pieces towards the right mix of work and towards the right
Mm-hmm.
relationship with the
Mm-hmm.
business. And I think that's one of
Mm,
those ingredients of um, choosing to say, I am not powerless. This isn't happening to me. This is an
mhm,
opportunity for me to go make the change that I want to see,
mhm,
and to take half an hour every day and just protect that time to go do the work that really lines up with the value that we need to
mhm,
create. Even if
mhm,
it's just blocking time in the calendar for a little bit of time every day, every week, to go put that consistency in towards the big picture. I think there's a
mm.
lot of people that just feel like they're drowning in the tyranny of the urgent, and they maybe don't feel
Yes,
like they have the
yes.
permission to do that. But
Mhm,
isn't that everybody's
mhm.
job, is to go and create that permission or
It,
take that permission and make it happen
mhm.
anyway?
I do think that, Sean, and I think it's a great point you make because none of what I've said is intended to imply that it's easy. It's not easy at all. That's why not everybody is doing it. It's not easy, and it is very easy to be indoctrinated into what you are supposed to be
Yeah.
doing. So I think that is tough, but it is
Yeah.
certainly the job of leaders in procurement to create that vision and to support that narrative that you've just talked about there. And I guess that brings us to like, well, where's procurement now and what's going on? And obviously what's going on is AI. There's
A
no
few
way to
people
avoid
talking about
it.
that.
Just a few, just a few. Heard something here or there. So, and I think what's really, really exciting now is ProcureTech and AI has now brought in procurement to an inflection point
Yeah.
where I think that the tools exist and the rapidity of development and implementation and the ability to experiment with things is really making that difference to procurement. So now I think that environment where you can rise above the PO is really being created. And I was super excited to see James Mead's video just the last few days. He was at the Lone Wolf or the Lone Wolf
Wolfpack.
Wolfpack, that's it. Wolfpack Summit in Nashville for smaller companies. So, and he came away talking about entrepreneurial procurement, which is really, getting a direct mandate from the COE, the CEO or the CFO or the COO, and able to carve out those things, even though you're a small procurement team. And I love that because that is really what I've been preaching all along, which is you need to be focusing on value. You need to be doing these things. And I think that the state of ProcureTech and AI is now enabling that because there are tools that will take some of that data drag away from procurement. And then, of course, you think, okay, are we all going to be made redundant or we don't need any analysts and what's going to happen? And I think not at all. I think this is enriching procurement work. This is allowing procurement to think and to utilize data and to employ insights in the ways that it just couldn't do before. Procurement was drowning in data, drowning in POs, drowning in technical work and risk assessments. I heard somebody saying it was Guru Satya from Etsy that was on your show before saying they got 80 risk assessments a week. And I think they're a team of like 10 people. And now they have a tool that does it for them. So now what they can do is they can actually think about the implications of those risk assessments. So I think this is a wonderful time to be in procurement right now. And there's a freedom coming and already here that we just haven't had before.
There's something really, really powerful when we think about how we capitalize on this. One of the things that I know some organizations look at this as, hey, I've got a better tool to do my job. One of the parallels that I often encourage people to think about is as factories, as an example, went from one engine that was steam powered to an electric engine, the torque profile, the power curves, all of these other, I'll call it really important facets of that equipment was quite different. And for the factories that replaced their steam engines with electric ones, they saw nominal, if any, real advantage. The ones that really got the value were the ones that took advantage of the significantly different torque curve and some of the other, I'll just call it facets of the difference in technology, had really significant return on investment for what could have otherwise been a replace in kind versus a redesign. Now, the
Yeah.
redesign takes courage, it takes work, it takes more effort. But I think that's one of the pieces that goes with this in terms of capitalizing is it's not just that we get to do more of the same faster, but rather we get to look at the work that
Yes.
needs to be done and pick it up and turn it and look at it from a new
Mm.
perspective. And
Totally.
now, how
Totally.
do we take advantage of this new capability? So what's our equivalent of the difference between the steam engine's torque power curve and an electric? Because this is so much bigger than that steam engine to electric or diesel engine. that so many factories have gone through. It is a
Mhm.
combination of electrification plus the printing press all together all at once.
All together, all at once. Yeah, yeah, that's a really great analogy. I think that's a lovely way to look at it. I guess for me, it is the ability to leverage or to unleash all of that data. So, I mean, first of all, you're taking away that, repetitive work, and that's all very, all that manual processing and, thankless work can really be minimized. And then I think what you're enabling people to do is kind of work in the data, work with the data lake. So, procurement had this kind of morass of data. It's like a big, enormous pond
Yeah.
that you can't actually see anything in because there's so much data.
Yeah.
And now AI is helping us like fish in that pond and say, this is what I want to take out.
Hmm.
This is what I want to do with it. And then when you have it on the shore, you can actually envisage, this is what I could do. So,
Yeah.
before, the insights was kind of this thing you did on a Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. because that was the time you'd carved out where you could do some thinking. And that was like this luxury that you would afford yourself after you've waded through all that stuff all week. Whereas now I think that people can and are really thinking, okay, now I've got all that information, or I have a way to get that information, and it won't be perfect. None of it is perfect, but
Yeah.
I have a way to codify loads and access loads and loads of information from inside, but also from outside the company. So what would I like to do with it? And I think that we are now able to think about what would we like to do with that information. So what would we like to do with that information? We would like, first of all, to have a much better idea of what we buy, where we spend the money, who we spend it with, the very basic things. But we all know that in reality, that's been really difficult for 20 years. We would like to understand, what are we supposed to be buying? What would we like to buy? What are the innovations? What are the company changes? What are the external market changes? So what is it that we want to acquire from outside, and what would make that better? And then what are the other factors out there? You can do an industry analysis now in half a day and have something that, when I was a graduate and I was doing my first category strategies, took 3 months. And I had to go places to get that data. I had to go and make friends with the supplier and the R&D person and the technical person and ingratiate myself. And I had to work really, really hard to get that data. And I didn't really have a way to benchmark whether a lot of it was right. I can literally sit in front of a tool like Perplexity this afternoon and do it with publicly available data. I mean, that is phenomenal.
Yeah.
So you can become so much of a rich expert in whatever it is you do in procurement now that previously we did not have that opportunity to do. And then you can really apply that in terms of, where does your organization want to get to, and where do you as a procurement team want to get to? And there is one word I'd add to what you were saying in terms of where we can go, and that's vision. You do have to have somebody within the procurement team who has the vision of what could be done differently. And I fully agree with you. There's no point like just making it, doing the same thing as we did yesterday and doing it slightly better, just giving you this tiny incremental change. And that would be a wasted opportunity, in my opinion.
What I think comes back to this is where are we and where are we going? And I think you were describing
Mm-hmm.
this through that lens of kind of baseline, objective. And I think these are the fundamental questions. And AI is but a tool. In so many
Mm-hmm.
ways, it's very much like a PowerPoint, in that you can have a wonderful PowerPoint presentation, or you can have one where you wish you had that half hour back. And the difference is often in how it's assembled and the questions that are raised or leveraged to create the story and the presentation in the first place. So
Yeah,
it feels
yeah.
like what you were describing, just to reinforce that, what questions we are using to drive these things of where
Mm-hmm.
are we, where are we
Mm-hmm.
going, what really matters.
Mm.
I know you've really got a passion for that. And I know you've been helping quite a few significant sized organizations and even some, SMBs of late, especially with your passion for product launches in
Mm-hmm.
terms of really dialing in what that means, what that matters. Would you be up for sharing a few of
Mm-hmm.
those types of questions or a story around what really makes the difference between understanding and going through the motions? Or I guess I should have done it as going through the motions versus understanding being above that.
Right. Yes. I'm trying to think of some examples now. I guess last year I was working with quite a large company, but a young procurement team, and in one particular category that I was supporting them with, they had basically two suppliers for nearly the whole category. Great relationships, good innovation, not bad cost profile. And so, they were kind of pretty satisfied with where they were with these suppliers, and it was a direct material, so supply chain was good, trust was good, cost profile was okay. So honestly, if they had been left alone, they would have carried on in that vein and felt pretty comfortable with where they are. But by really asking the right questions about, it was a little bit, well, how do you know this? And how did you demonstrate this? And what have you compared this to? We were really able to demonstrate a huge changes that they could make for that would improve margin, that would improve innovation, and that would also reduce risk because they had a little bit lost sight of, these very comfortable relationships, which make you feel very warm and cozy, actually carry a high degree of risk on the other side because you get over dependent. Um, but so how did we do that? It is really about questioning the status quo, which is something we've all done forever. But in this particular instance, by really employing external benchmarks and external market data, we were able to unlock that in a much more explicit fashion. That was very hard for them not to be able to get on board with. So again, something that could have taken 3 months in the past could very easily be accessed. And it is really about staying completely curious. And I think right now people can be a lot more curious than they could be in the past because there's a lot more access to information. But to your point, you have to know what to do with it. You do have to know what are the questions to ask, and I guess in this company they were looking at it through one or two lenses, and they had lost sight of perhaps some of the other lenses and some of the other offerings on the market, and where they could really go with that. There are some other examples I can think of also in terms of thinking about the end-to-end supply chain and really marrying up both your commercial profiles. How do I want to sell this? Who's going to buy it? Under what circumstances are they going to buy it? And how am I going to link that up with the back end? So, I worked with a deep tech company in the UK a couple of years ago, and they thought they had one problem. They brought me in to say, we've got a big contract, it's about to go live, could you help us see if this contract terms and conditions are robust? And actually, when I went into their contract, what I said was, well, there's a big gap in your contract world, which is actually a gap in your supply chain, which is that you are building a prototype of a product, but you have a contract that is designed for when you're going to sell 1 million a year of this product. And your financial, contractual, and supply chain model does not talk about the phase in the middle at all. So by looking at one question, we came to a very different point, but that was also born out of understanding where are they trying to get to, but also understanding how to marry where you're trying to get to your supply world, whether that's a physical supply chain or a virtual supply chain.
What I really enjoy about that is a couple of threads from what you described that I want to make sure somebody watching this takes home is one, it used to be so much work to go and do some of the research to assemble it. And the research that we had was dependent on data that was still at best marked with a yellow exclamation question mark. And then we get to the point where we can do that so much faster. And for everybody in procurement, the cost per, from a pure cost accounting, please, nobody ever over-index on cost accounting because this can get you locked into a cost per. But I will also recognize that it's something that makes sense to a lot of people. So the cost per question before was so high that it would take 3 months and many, many, many hours and weeks of work and effort and research. That cost per question now has collapsed so spectacularly.
Yeah,
And the
that's
ability to
yeah.
wade through the data swamp or data lake, depending on where you are on the data quality, because even if it's a data swamp, it's okay. There's still data. It
There
probably has
is still
three
data
versions of
there.
the same,
Yes.
right? The same supplier is in there 4 times, 4 different ways. However, this is not an insurmountable problem. This is an
Mm,
imperfection problem. And
yes.
I'll come back to
Yeah.
that imperfection in a second, but the cost per question has really collapsed, right?
Yeah.
And so
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I know a lot of leaders I have a big opportunity to do is to stop being so shy about asking the question. Because in
Mm-hmm.
some cases, they can
Mm-hmm.
ask the question themselves and get the answer themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's an opportunity for so many leaders to retrain and rewire around, do we ask the
Mm.
question? Because the effort to go and get the answer used to be so
Mm-hmm.
scarce
Mm-hmm.
that this fundamental is no longer true and it no longer
Mm.
serves us. So that same
Mm-hmm.
kind of a what's changed? How is that moving? And this other piece, I think this leads into kind of a good topic to land the plane on, is this idea of progress over perfection. And I think
Yes.
this is one where there's data quality matters. And I don't think anyone would say it doesn't, but it is also not an intractable fortress where unless your data is pristine, you can't do anything. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a yes
Mm-hmm.
and, not a sequential to go and
Yeah.
make progress. And this concept of progress over perfection is
Mm-hmm.
one that I know there's a lot of perfectionists out there, and risk aversion is often the basis
Yes.
for so many of the policies that we have. What
Mm-hmm.
advice do you have for procurement pros out there in that progress over perfection kind of a mindset?
Yeah, great question. And I used to be one of those people, those perfectionists, and I certainly have worked for many perfectionists. So for me, I kind of think in this world of procurement, what you really need to do is right now is stay curious, but ditch the perfectionism. I think the world is progressing so fast now that that perfectionism is not helping you at all. It's actually holding you back. You need to be willing to be a little freer and a little bit more creative and a little bit more curious. And I think those are the procurement teams that are winning. And I think that because, as you say, the sort of cost per question has gone down, that applies within procurement teams as well. You can afford to play with things, model things, remodel things in a way you couldn't before. And there used to be very strongly a culture in procurement of you've got to be perfect. Like every number has got to be triple checked. Every slide has got to be perfect. And as you say, it's not to undermine any of those points of quality of work and quality of data. But we are now in a position where being creative, being curious, being prepared to experiment is far closer to us, far more within our grasp, and far more rewarding than
Yes.
spending that extra 2 weeks making everything perfect. And that is what's going to bring you forward. And I think that's a brilliant place to be.
Yeah,
I mean, that
absolutely.
frees people to be creative and curious and experiment and look at the world outside in a much broader way. And those are all important things that really help companies, and they really make people's jobs much more rewarding. So to me, those are huge opportunities.
I think there's something to be said for the curiosity, and I would hope some folks out there are curious about how you could help them, Adrienne. For those people that are curious, I know you're pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. What's the best way
Yep.
for somebody to get in touch with you?
Yeah, love to help people, particularly around scaling businesses, as we've talked, procurement transformation, procurement tactical to strategic. And my LinkedIn is always open, so just drop me a message on LinkedIn, put a connect request in, and I would be delighted to talk to you.
Adrienne, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I'm sure we could keep talking for an hour. I'm looking forward to connecting again soon. And for all of you watching, thank you very much. This has been another edition of The Never Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Sean.